Well, good afternoon, everybody. No pressure to me to keep the momentum going for the afternoon. At least I got you fresh off of coffee, so you're not going to, it's probably about 20, 30 minutes before you doze off after that. So my name is Debbie Barry, and I'm a National Program Manager at Veterans Affairs Canada. So I work in an operational division. I am not an IT person, a technical person, so I'm here to give you that business perspective. And I'm going to talk to you about a practical experience of moving an AI-enabled capability from a grassroots prototype into a structured, governed pilot within the federal policy environment. We're focused on governance, business leadership, and human-centered approach that allowed us to explore technology responsibly. So like many public sector organizations, we're facing a lot of pressure. We have a sustained growth in application volumes. We're up over 120% in the last decade, and an increase in file complexity. It's not uncommon for a single application that we're receiving to arrive with over 800 pages of medical and service records. And our challenge is finding ways to improve timeliness for those we serve without sacrificing the quality or the fairness or human accountability of those final decisions. As with everyone, your options are limited. You could add more people. You could decide to extend your timelines or your service standards, or you can improve efficiency. We weren't getting more money for more people. Nobody had any interest in changing our turnaround times and extending our timelines, so really all that was left for us to do was to look at efficiencies. Our intent was never to replace decision makers, but to reduce the administrative burden so that they could focus on the weighing of the evidence and rendering decisions, and so that we could get more throughput with the same number of people. We had many ideas, one of which was to explore how we could use AI in our process. So this initiative didn't start in the boardroom. This is where the spoiler alert comes from. This was an employee-driven concept. One of our medical advisors got so frustrated and annoyed with the way that they were having to do the work that they, on their own, designed up a little prototype of a potential tool using synthetic data so that they could demonstrate what that might look like. As you can imagine, as many of you have probably over the years read, 50-page business requirement documents that are super dry and technical and detailed, and you're like dozing off after page 2. If somebody can show you something, then you get a lot more interest. So this employee showed their boss, who showed the director, who showed the DG, who showed the ADM, and the ADM said, go take some people and figure out how to do that. Now, the prototype that this person built in their frustration is not what it looks like today, but it certainly got the conversation started and got us moving towards a solution. And as that interest grew, we transitioned from having that individual solution on one person's laptop with synthetic data into a more governed process, moving into secure enterprise infrastructure with privacy and security controls. And that shift from prototype from pilot was not primarily technical, it was governance driven. So before moving to AI, we asked ourselves some really important questions. I've heard these questions brought up through several people's presentations today. And things like, could we clearly define the problem? In our case, we have a big, long process that engages multiple steps. And instead of saying we're going to use AI to solve the whole thing, we said, what is this one chunk of the process that takes a whole lot of time? So there's one chunk of our process that takes 2 to 3 hours on average. And we said, instead of shaving 10 seconds off a 30-second process, what if we could shave 2 hours off a 4-hour process? So what we are piloting right now is actually smack dab in the middle of our process. And so the front end is still clunky, the back end is still clunky, but because we could save some time in the middle on this one section, that's what we went for with our prototype. we asked ourselves, is AI actually the right solution? Like, with plenty of things, and we've heard this today, people jump to immediately, let's do AI. Well, maybe actually, if you just have some really clear binary rules, you just need to automate it. You don't need to use AI. Could we explain the underlying rules? If you can't explain the rules to a human, you are never going to explain it to AI to do it for you. And like many others have talked about, layering AI on top of something is just going to expose the slimy underbelly of everything that you may have been hiding for years. And so we really had to get serious about defining what the rules actually were and being able to clearly articulate them. And then, how can we define success from a quality and policy perspective? So once we determined that this was an appropriate use case, our next step was to establish some guardrails before moving forward. Complex work, we're still learning. The initial thoughts about what our guardrails were have evolved over the last number of months as we've been working through from pilot to prototype. And from the onset, we treated this as a high-risk space requiring active management of bias, explainability, and appropriate use. Our exploration is anchored in 3 core pillars: full adherence to all Government of Canada compliance requirements, like the Directive on Automated Decision-Making, to ensure that we are transparent and accountable. Human in the loop by design. The capability is limited to decision support. It doesn't render decisions or determine eligibility. That remains fully a human responsibility. And quality. We had an enduring commitment to service quality improvement. We made sure that all of our folks knew that in no way, shape, or form anything that we were going to do couldn't make things worse. They had to at least make things marginally better or remain the same. We could not make things worse. Oh, I think I might have gotten ahead of myself on the slide here. There we go. So usability is just as important as accuracy. So in our process, we have actively worked with practitioners early on using iterative feedback loops. We engaged subject matter experts and users from the beginning. We had some subject matter experts who were working with us in the early, really ugly, days when we were giving them practically, it looked like it had been typed out on Notepad. That's what the responses were looking for. And we were sending them to the users and we were saying, is it better now? Is it better now? Is it better now? And actively working with them on that and testing the capability against real-world workflows to see if it reduced the administrative burden or if it added new steps. From the beginning, we were explicit that the tool was being built for our users. In the past, technology changes have always been framed as client-focused or designed with the client in mind. And while that is well-intentioned, sometimes that doesn't produce the desired results. What we deliberately designed was something that would work for our users, knowing that the end consequence would be that the clients were going to get a better result at the other end. We built in feedback mechanisms, including tool usage data, so that we can get continuous iteration and user-driven improvements. We started rolling this pilot out to 300 decision makers in mid-February. We've made 11 user-informed enhancements since then, based on their feedback, which has really helped us with engagement and adoption. They are not changes to how the tool works. They are mostly changes with how our users interact with the tool. But because of that, they are happier. They are seeing that what they're asking. In the past, they would ask for system changes, and 6 months, 8 months, 6 years from now, somebody does something about it. Whereas now they're saying, oh, they asked for a Zoom feature, and 3 weeks later they had a Zoom feature. So that is the kind of feedback that we're working on now. So what this really showed for us is that we were really moving into new territory. And one of the things that we really learned is that it's a new partnership model for us. We had to be much more intentional about roles. That, IT experts are responsible for system integrity, data, infrastructure, and the business and subject matter experts are responsible for the judgment. They assess the quality of the outputs. They ensure alignment with policy and monitor for fairness and bias. Your subject matter experts and your business experts are the only ones who understand the context. So it's a simple way to think about it is that what the business leads is the what and the why, and the IT supports the how. And what was different here is that we had business leads and subject matter experts who were literally, figuratively, sitting in the room with the IT developers, and so that when the IT developers had a question about, well, why did you want a drop-down menu with 4 things on it? Then we could give them the context of this is how they're using it, or this is how 3 steps down the process, we need that information. And so while it doesn't seem important here, it actually is because of this business context or whatever we could explain to understand it for them. The business brings a really deep knowledge of the problem and the current process. So they need to stay connected to developers throughout the build, especially in an iterative environment where design decisions are happening quickly and we need to be able to be there to explain the why. Without that shared model, we would not have been able to move in such a quick and controlled way. Oh, I think my slides got in a little different order than what I had here. So the other thing that became really apparent to us was the whole idea around evaluation. So like one of the other presenters talked about earlier today, when you're using AI, you don't always get the same response. But those 2 or 3 responses could all be reasonable responses, and the only people who will know whether those are reasonable responses are the subject matter experts. And so where traditional testing is a pass-fail based on factual correctness, like if I'm asking you to build me a tool that does calculations, you can know that the math is mathing, and that is the right answer. However, if I'm asking you to build me a tool that is, sort of nuanced, questioning, wondering, giving me reasonable answers, then you need some subject matter expertise in order to be able to assess that. The other thing is that AI evaluation is continuous. You can't just turn it on and walk away and be done with it. We know that LLMs are changing so quickly that we need to be ready for the next one to turn on in 6 months, because the one you're on currently is going to be turned off and you have to be ready to go. My policy could change. Something in my knowledge base could change. The context of my program could change. So I need to be able to make those changes and constantly be able to evaluate what's happening there. It could drift. I need to be able to monitor and make sure that I'm still getting expected reasonable results, the same ones that I was getting a week ago, a month ago, etc. We want to be able to check our users for automation bias. Does it get to a point where the users sort of become blind to it and are just, become that Homer Simpson, the bird pecking on the keyboard, and are just accepting it? So what are we building into our model to check for those sorts of things? So those are the sort of things that an automated or standard test script could miss, and that's why you need to have sort of that really, business can't walk away and say this is an IT problem and IT is going to build it, monitor it, and I never have to think about it again. You have to be actively engaged and involved and accountable for the evaluation as well. We built in safeguards along the way. So in our case, for example, we said that if decision makers have enough information in front of them for a favorable decision, they can use our tool. If they don't have enough information in front of them, they can't rely solely on the tool. They have to go and double check. And one of our feedback loops is that if they're rendering the tool didn't give them enough for a favorable decision, but then they were able to ultimately render a favorable decision, what did the tool miss? So they can, in their feedback loop, tell us what they found. And we are reading those surveys every single day. And we're saying, oh, that's interesting. Let's go dig into that file, see what happened, make a change, make an update so that we can correct for that. But also because we have tool usage data, we're able to, in 6 months, a year, be able to say to our senior leaders, here's what we know. Of the 10,000 unfavorable cases, this many of them, nobody made any change and they were still unfavorable. Maybe now there is a confidence that we can allow our users to go forward with unfavorable decisions using the tool in these particular circumstances. It will depend what the data tells us, but we will, for possibly the first time ever, have that data available to be able to give those sort of metrics and then have those data inform decisions. So what are some takeaways? Again, like we've heard it again and again, it's a business and government challenge. It's not a technical challenge. The technology will 100% work. Where you're going to fall down is in the court of public opinion, in your clients wondering about their privacy and how secure the data is, in their confidence that what you're doing is at least as good as what your humans were doing. So investing in safeguards early and defining and documenting what your risk profile and risk tolerance is actually supports speed, because people can point to that as the North Star and they can say, okay, I'm empowered to make decisions. Does this fall in line with what my bosses have told me our risk tolerance is? It is? Okay, then I can make that decision and we can go forward. Oh, it isn't? I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to present it, and somebody is going to sign off on that decision based on what they move forward with. Business must maintain sustained ownership. It's not something that can be handed off to IT and hope everything works out. And that we have to really replace the linear delivery with iterative approaches. You have to be willing to turn something on that's okay, or that's good enough, that fits within your safeguards and your risk tolerance. So for example, when we turned on our pilot, we knew that you could only use it for 70% of our claims. And we turned it on anyway, because you know what? We had a perfectly good exception queue, which was the status quo process. So what we are working on is making it really good at doing those 70%, and then slowly we will bring the 30% in until we have a much smaller exception queue. We will probably always have an exception queue. We have a benefit that's 100 years old that's had 1 million pieces of patchwork added to it over the years. I like to call it boutique benefits sometimes, because we have these weird, little exception rules for this, that, and the other thing. So some of those claim types will never go through there. And we will just have to train a dozen highly trained people who will always do those particular claims, because it's not worth investing the time and the technology in building a system that can do it for you. So really, technology is evolving, and evolving super quickly and super fast. I mentioned the Directive on Automated Decision-Making that we follow, and I believe it has been updated 4 times. It was updated again already this year. So, those things are evolving and changing. Even what, if you did a literature review of, best ways to evaluate an AI tool, it would be out of date by the time you published your document. So you're having to be constantly learning, changing, evolving, and being ready to look at that. And our responsibility is just to ensure that our governance and decision-making evolves just as quickly and as deliberately. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much, Deb.